go. Okay, good morning / good afternoon. Thank you very much for joining me again today for day 2 of Become the Female Leader of the Future. Today we are talking about connection, which is super important when it comes to really thriving as a leader and really stepping into that power that we have underneath. So yesterday we talked about what power we have, the importance of starting to really build a connection with it, starting to recognize what the power is that we hold, the importance of emotional intelligence for leadership, why women do so well at emotional intelligence because of the way that we've been socialized into it. And we spent a little bit of time reflecting on our superpowers, really kind of turning the things that we've seen as negatives or we've been told are negatives, really turning them around and reclaiming some of the ownership of them. So today we're going to kind of the next stage of it. So the whole system that I'm taking everyone through this week is my Ignite program system, which is all about building the emotionally powerful female leaders of the future. So the 3 components are power, connection, and authenticity. So connection is what we're doing today. If you missed power yesterday, then you can catch up on that later. We're going to do a bit more self-reflection than we did yesterday, so it's a little bit more kind of journaling time and pause to kind of really think about what's going on with us, but that's a whole important part of connection, which you'll see when we get to that. So again, as with yesterday, I really want you to get the useful information to start building the blocks of making the change in these areas, giving you some tools, giving you the ability to do that kind of self-reflection, start asking questions and helping you to kind of move through those moments that are tricky. And we can chat about working together long-term if that's something that you're interested in later. I want to talk now about what I mean when I say connection. I mean kind of a couple of different things wrapped up in one. So when I say connection, I am talking about our connection with ourselves and our connection with others. And that being very much a two-way exchange of energy and information and so on. So the first part of it is emotional intelligence. That is our ability to identify and understand our own emotions and the emotions of other people around us. So that is how well do you connect with other people and yourself on an emotional level. There are 5 key aspects to emotional intelligence. There's self-awareness. So this is, what do I know about myself? How well do I know important things about my emotions? When do they crop up? What are my triggers and so on? Self-regulation. How well can I manage them? How well do I understand how to pause, breathe, wait a moment before reacting? There is motivation. So that is, how well do I keep myself going? A lot of that comes down to resilience, but it's also our relationships with failure. It's also our ability to pick ourselves up when things aren't going well, and actually motivate ourselves by focusing on what is working for us and what are the positives that are happening for us rather than needing that to come from the outside. Then we have empathy. Empathy is all about how we can understand what might be going on with another person. So this is really about the other person involved in our exchange. What might be happening with them? How can we taking ourselves out of the equation, basically, when we're looking at empathy. And then social skills. So how well do I act in a social situation? Can I have conversations with people? Can I have challenging conversations? So on and so forth. Then the other element of connection that is really important for me, and I think is incredibly important for you as female leaders, is intuition. So that's like the next level of self-awareness. This is really about listening into what that deep knowing part of us is telling us. And that part is sometimes based on the things that our subconscious knows about us. It's also based on our experiences. It's based on what we learn over time. It's not always just, you don't always have the same immediate kind of gut reaction, I don't think, at the same points in your life, because you learn more about what works for you. And it's just a really rapid way of making a response and getting a signal. And it also tells us important things about what's happening around us and what's happening with other people. So it's a layer deeper for me than just the emotional intelligence, because it's listening to that signal that's coming up super quickly and allowing us to be guided a little bit more by what's happening internally for us, rather than all of the kind of noise that's happening in the world around us. So this is all really about kind of human to human connection, you to yourself, you to others. The reason that's really important for leadership is primarily businesses are made up of humans. So we really want to be able to, if we're leading, we want to be able to get the best from ourselves and from one another. And that does require emotional intelligence. I talked yesterday about the data that there is, which supports the fact that emotional intelligence is one of, if not the most important skill for good, strong leadership. So this is really kind of what we're going to dive into a bit more today. It's about how to start unlocking that more for you. Women also can demonstrate emotional intelligence better than men, as I talked about yesterday. So therefore, we have this connection between women being really strong at leadership because we're able to demonstrate emotional intelligence skills better. So it's super important because we can understand challenges better. We can understand what's going on with other people around us. We're able to be open to challenge and question because actually we have got the openness and the space to take that, because we're sort of sitting with that confidence within ourselves, and we're able to listen to what other people have got going on and what other people have to say. We're able to take ourselves out of the equation, and that's something that's really, really important. We're also able to manage our emotions. So the speed that we move from reaction to response. So the reaction is that immediate kind of flare up of, it might be an anxiety, it might be an anger, it might be a nervousness, whatever it might be. If the response happens really quickly, the response is usually driven by that initial emotion. But by building our emotional intelligence, what we're able to do is slow down the period of time from reaction to response. So we might have a reaction of anger, and that's okay. But what we're able to do is take a moment to go, okay, is this about me? What else might be happening? How might I be triggered here? And the more we practice this, the more effective we get at it happening quickly. But that's what enables us to slow down that period. And that's incredibly powerful because, again, you're taking yourself out of an equation and you're able to deal with something actually with more calm and more context and more space. So I say it's basically we're able to just leave our own shit at the door. And you're also able then to understand not only what's going on with you, but what is going on with someone else. You can really start to get a picture of the factors that might be contributing to their situation, to their reactions, to their responses, and so on. You're able to have difficult conversations more effectively. And obviously, as a leader, that's something that is really important. It helps to build up resilience. It helps to build up our ability to, I like to think of resilience as something which keeps us soft rather than keeping us hard, than making us hard. But actually the resilience is kind of having the softness and being able to still keep moving through when things are difficult, and still keeping that vulnerability and that compassion and that more kind of emotional side of us. And this is just how we get the best out of people. By bringing all of these things together, this is how you get the best out of a team, and this is how you lead with the best level of authority and compassion and so on. One of the reasons why, a kind of core reason why women demonstrate better EQ, and I'm very specifically saying that we demonstrate it better, not that we have it more or that we are naturally better at it. We are socialized to demonstrating emotional intelligence better. So we're generally a bit better at intuition, at trusting our gut. We are generally better at empathy, at listening. And a lot of this is because of how we're programmed into this kind of nurturing. Sometimes there's the people-pleasing element of it that when we go too far, but we are kind of socialized into nurturing and caring. And obviously we have the flip side where sometimes we're taught that these things are too much and they have no place in business. So we end up in that double bind, particularly as women who want to be leaders, because we've been taught a lot of these things are really appealing and really acceptable traits to demonstrate as a woman. But when we get into a business, and particularly quite male-dominated spaces, it can be hard, where they're running from a very kind of masculine energy, is actually that it's no longer something that is considered valuable. And so we tend to squash it down, or we get stuck in that space of, I don't know who I am, I don't know how to behave, what is the right thing to do. We stop listening to ourselves. The more we have these voices all around us, the harder it becomes to tap into actually what's happening with our intuition. So we do get taught this stuff really early. So I just want you to take a pause for a moment and just reflect if that connects with you. Like, have you connected with this idea that these are things that you've learned from an early stage? And are these things that you feel like, you know, you maybe recognize some of these skills as being things that you've been taught, but perhaps you haven't necessarily been told that they're actually extraordinarily valuable when it comes to leadership? And just think about that for a moment. What I want to do is kind of talk you through how to start really building that connection. So building that connection with yourself and with others. There are 3 key areas that I focus on in the program when it comes to emotional intelligence. So I think there are 3 which are key for leadership. And actually, the others kind of come as a result from them. So the 3 key ones that I focus on are self-awareness, self-regulation, and empathy. So self-awareness and empathy are the 2 that are kind of ranked the highest when it comes to a really effective leadership. And I include self-regulation because I think it's incredibly important, because the more that we can really manage and understand ourselves, that helps to drive the empathy. You almost imagine them kind of really interconnected. But if we can build up those 3, then things like motivation becomes easier, our social skills become easier. But also social skills, you know, we're able to have difficult conversations, we're able to, you know, kind of work as part of a team and so on. But those first 3 are really, really critical. So that's the ones that I focus on. So that's really about who you are, how you work, when are you at your best, understanding, okay, what happens when, as I said, what are my triggers, understanding how other people are feeling. But that also only comes when we know ourselves first. So it's really difficult to go kind of straight into empathy if we don't have a really good connection with ourselves. If we don't know quite clearly what's going on with us, it's very difficult to then start understanding what might be going on with someone else. We can do it, but we're missing a really core piece of the puzzle. And then intuition, in addition, as I said. So this is the kind of 4th aspect that I really look at, because when women are able to get out of their heads, and when women are able to quiet down the noise that comes from all of the different things in their lives, all of the different things from society, from their businesses, that's telling them, you need to be this, you need to be that, you've got to do this, this is important, and so on and so forth. This is the wrong decision, you should do this, you should do that. When women are able to actually quiet down those voices and focus in on what they want and make decisions that are driven by their desires, by their heart, the change is incredible. And I see this happen with my clients all the time. Women are able to get to the point where they're making decisions that are really satisfying, that are really aligned with what's important to them, where they're able to say, this is my decision and I own it. And actually what you think about it isn't really that important, because this is the path that I'm on. And it makes such a massive change. Charlotte says, feeling attacked by others' opinions of what leadership should be. Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And that takes us away from this ability to understand how we want to lead and what is the right way for us to do it, because we have all of this noise. And again, as women, we're really socialized into listening to all of that noise. And this is part of the kind of deprogramming of some of that work. We're socialized into putting everyone else first. We're socialized into listening because that's sort of seen as being a good girl. You know, you're listening to everyone. Oh, tell me what you think. I want to hear your opinion. We're also conditioned into having a bit more self-doubt. And we're also conditioned away from risk. So it's not necessarily that we take less risk. It's that actually risk is something that we're kind of punished more, basically, when our risks don't pay off than men are. And so all of that makes it really difficult to kind of understand how it is that you might feel and what it is that is the right thing for you. And again, as I said yesterday, you know, the more that we can quiet that down, the more that we can really tap into who we are and what's right for us, the more we're able to demonstrate our power, and the more kind of freeing it is as well. So it's completely possible to do, but there is a little bit of work that we need to do. The reason why I think all of this is so important for you to get into this place of emotionally powerful leadership and to connect with all of this emotional intelligence and all of these things that you have, is because we need better leaders in the world. I think now more than ever, it's becoming incredibly clear that we need to be changing things on a big scale. And women have not had enough seats at the tables of power for a very long time. So we need more leaders in every single place where power is held, in order to be making the right level of changes. That's incredibly important. And the world has been telling us for a really long time that we're too emotional, that vulnerability is bad, that there's only one way of doing things. And that tends to be that very typical way, as I said, the masculine kind of energetic way of leading that kind of puts business first and people second, even though all of the data shows that that is the wrong way of doing things. All the data shows that there is better performance, there's better profit, people do better if you focus on people first and if you've got really emotionally intelligent leaders at the helm. So we really want to get more women into that space, because if we can start accessing this stuff that we already have, we start to become unstoppable, because we're able to really kind of shut that noise down. So I want to just tell you a little bit about kind of my experience of that kind of connection. So I spoke yesterday about learning or being taught, I suppose is probably the best phrase, from a young age, that I was too emotional. So as a result of that, I kind of created a distance between myself and my emotions. And what that meant was I didn't really understand always how I felt. I actually had a massive amount of emotions kind of constantly bubbling under the surface, but I wasn't able to direct them and I wasn't able to access them. I didn't really know what they were. And what it meant was I quite often felt like I just had a bit of a barrier between myself and other people. I would be quite quick to react because I didn't really understand what my reactions were about. And a lot of my way of kind of dealing with stuff is like, I would get a bit angry, and I would get, sometimes a little bit kind of ranty and all that kind of thing. But at the same time, I was sort of becoming a bit more aware that I had a really big sense of empathy. And sometimes I could almost feel a bit overwhelmed by other people's emotions. But because I was told that emotions were bad, it was like, well, you can't feel that. That's not okay. So we need to put up even more distance. So it's just like quite a lot going on. And what I've done in the past, it's probably the past kind of 6 or 7 years now, is really get to grips with all of that, understanding where that's come from, do the work to release it, to move past it, to deprogram it. And I practice quite a lot. And the more that I practice, kind of the easier things become. It's made a really massive difference. It's why I'm able to do the work that I do now, because I'm really well connected to my emotions. I'm very self-aware. I'm not fully 100% self-aware, but I am pretty self-aware. I do have the ability to understand what's going on with me, where something actually might be nothing to do with the other person. And that doesn't mean that I don't have moments where I get annoyed, where somebody really annoys me, and it's like that almost irrational, like, why do you annoy me? And you can't understand it for a moment. Like, I have those moments. I get moments where I get pissed off by stuff. Like, I'm a human being. But I can then step back and look at, okay, what's gone on? Right, okay, that person's like irrationally annoyed you. What's going on there? What is it about that? What have you reacted to? Is that similar to something old? Is there maybe some old trauma that you haven't dealt with in the right way? Is there a limiting belief that this person has kind of triggered in you a little bit? Is there maybe something going on with this other person that's absolutely nothing to do with me? And then I can kind of balance it out. And so that really enables you to understand what's going on with the situation, and you get all of this context. And it doesn't mean that it's not hard sometimes, because it can be, but it does enable me to reclaim a lot of my power. And I think that's one of the things that's really important to take from this, is that you can absolutely reclaim the power from all of these situations. It is yours. We just have to understand how to do it, and we just have to do a little bit of practice. And I'm sure you'll all know, when you ignore things like your intuition in particular, you kind of look back and you'll be like, oh, I knew that wasn't right. You look back and you'll be like, oh, that guy that I dated for 6 months, like, I mean, I had like alarm bells going off in my head for like 4.5 of those 6 months, and I ignored them. Or it might be, oh, yeah, I took that job and I knew deep down that it wasn't right. And 3 years later, I'm still here and I'm trying to work out how to get out, but my confidence is low and I don't know what to do. And, oh, if only I'd just listened to myself. So we do all have that. It's just that it tends to be easier to notice it when we look back. What we want to do is notice it in the moment so that we can actually get in touch with it. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how to start practicing, because it is a practice, as all these things are. But these practices, I think, are like really fun, and they're really good ways of starting to kind of really tie into that stuff so that you notice it immediately. If your gut goes, and then you can step back and you can reflect and take it from there. So I like to think about this connection, and so emotional intelligence plus intuition. I like to think about this as a blueprint for great relationships. You think of it as a blueprint or a map, depending on kind of how you see it. But what this basically does is it shows us the map to a good relationship. And what all of these different aspects are, all of the different important layers of the map, the blueprint. So, you know, we're going to understand the layers of ourselves, the layers of our responses, the layers of communication, emotions, what might be happening with another person, and so on and so forth, what we sense, what our intuition is telling us. And, you know, it might be, oh, if I do this or I ask these questions, this is how we'll get to a great relationship. It also helps give that map for like, how do you get people when you're leading a team, how do you get them to deliver great results? Because you've got all of these pieces. But if you don't have all of the aspects of this map, you're not able to take that journey in its fullest way. Because, you know, if you imagine you've got a map, but like there's no rivers in it, and you're following the map and you're like, okay, yeah, this makes sense. And then suddenly there's a river there and you didn't expect it and you're not equipped. So whilst it's possible to kind of feel your way through it, your structure overall, like your map isn't as strong, it's not as complete, and it can kind of crumble a little bit. So what we want to do is make sure that we've got all of these building blocks in place because they work together. So none of them is kind of a thing in isolation. They're all like intersected. I'm going to talk about them slightly individually today, just for the sake of time. But it's something to think about when it comes to how you start tapping into this later, is how might these things now start working together? How can I piece these puzzle pieces all together? I want to take you through some ways of starting to build these skills now. So the first one I want to focus on is self-awareness. And so this is all about getting to know yourself. And this is where we're just going to sit in a bit of self-reflection. If you want to share anything that pops up, then absolutely do, but there's no kind of requirement to do that. But the first thing I want you to ask yourself is, what makes you really happy? Just go from the gut and just kind of free write. You don't need to be writing sentences. It doesn't even need to be anything that makes sense. Just allow whatever comes up when I say that. What makes you happy? Charlotte says family. Great. Okay, and now I want you to write down what frustrates you the most. And this can be in any scenario. This can be in a work scenario. This can be in a supermarket with your family, like whatever it might be. What frustrates you? Lindsay says her pugs make her happy. That's cute. Barriers and noise. Okay, great. People and not listening. People not listening, sorry. Yeah, great. Politics in the office. That's a good one. Yeah. Okay. And now I want you to write down, when are you at your best? Probably not at work. Okay, can you be a little bit more specific, Charlotte? Can you get more specific into what moments are at your best? So it might be you're at your best when you're able to demonstrate a certain skill or a certain thing that you really love, or when you are supported in a particular way. Just if you think about kind of your ability to perform well, what are the specifics? Mona says, when I can connect the dots. Yeah, when I'm confident in myself and my knowledge, and can I get this across? Okay, great. With my family, I'm less stressed, I'm calm, I'm not being attacked. Okay. What I want you to do with these kind of 3 bits of information is see if you can kind of link them together when it comes, particularly when it comes to the workplace, because obviously a lot of what I'm doing is about leadership, but it doesn't exclusively have to be that. It applies to everything. Is to think about knowing when you're at your best, knowing the things that frustrate you, knowing the things that make you happy. Are there any things that you could do to make changes that enable you to feel better, more settled, more calm within a work environment? So, if there's something, so Mona said when she connects the dots, she's at her best. So like, are there projects that would enable you to do that in the best possible way? How can you remove yourself from politics in the office? Charlotte, for you, if it's about noise and stimulation, what can you do in order to reduce that? Sometimes when we're caught in it, we can lose sight of just taking a step back and thinking, how can I adjust this situation? And so have a look at what your options might be to make some changes. But these kind of questions are important to ask yourself and understand. I mean, this is just a snippet, but you could really kind of go much deeper with this. The shift from working from home and then coming back to the before COVID might take some time to adjust. Yeah. I think also, what do you need in order to adjust? And what do you need in order to make it happen for you in the best possible way? I think, again, we're being told that we're sort of going back into life before COVID, but we're not going back into life before COVID. We're going into like a world that is different. And so actually, what is it that you need in this new world right now in order for you and your team to be the best? But just kind of keep, Lindsay says, bring my pugs to work. Kidding, but I could take more breaks when working from home to walk the dogs and do what I enjoy before going back to work. That's fantastic. Yeah, that's great. And, these things can be small, but it's just how we can kind of support ourselves and listen to that. It's asking the questions of ourselves, right? Is, if you understand when you're happy, if you understand things like what your triggers are, if you understand when you are at your best and at your worst, again, particularly in a working environment, and that could be within the situation, but it could also be from people. So, what do you really respond well to when it comes to your team? Are you somebody who responds well to honesty, to rapid communication, to more information versus less information? Are you somebody who prefers someone to come to you immediately with a problem and then you discuss the solution together? Or do you want them to take some time, think about a solution, and then come and speak to you? So just like think about those kind of things, because there isn't only one way of doing this. And again, we're kind of taught that, but it's absolute bullshit. There isn't one way of this being. What we sometimes get is we get learnings from the people above us, particularly as we kind of start early in our careers, that this is the way that we ought to manage. This is the way that we ought to lead. And you've got the opportunity to really look at what's useful for my team to know about how to get the best from me, and what's useful for me to know about how to get the best from them. And that kind of I'll come to that in a second in terms of other people. The next aspect of this is self-regulation. So this is about managing your own emotions. So first thing I want you to do is just notice when you feel, you can kind of choose an emotion. I'm going to say upset, but if you feel like you've got a different emotion, it might be anger, it might be frustration, whatever it is. I want you to just key into it and just interrogate a little bit. How do you know that you're feeling that way? So how do you know you're feeling upset? How does it feel physically in your body? Do you have any responses that come up? Do you have any behaviors that you start to demonstrate when you're feeling whatever it is that you want to kind of interrogate a little bit? So just sit with that and think about it. Just cast your mind back to the last time that you felt that way and see what comes up for you. So one of the reasons why I think this kind of thing is incredibly important is that we're not really taught about regulating our emotions well enough, I don't think. We're taught that there are good emotions and bad emotions. So things like anger, fear, jealousy, anxiety, we're taught that those are bad ways to feel. And what that means is quite often we're just kind of encouraged to just push them to the side. But what happens if they don't go anywhere? We're just like squashing them down and kind of trying to ignore them, and they just stick around. The more that we can understand, because I think crucially it's important to note, like, all of these things come up. You don't get to a point of enlightenment where you don't ever feel angry about something. If you do, you've probably gone too far into a space where you're kind of almost numbing yourself to the myriad of human emotions, because they're all there, they're all important, and actually they're all teaching us something. There's a reason why these emotions come up. And the importance of recognizing that we have that feeling and just allowing ourselves to feel it is incredibly powerful when it comes to just managing them. Because actually, if you can notice it, if you can let it exist and you go, oh, okay, yeah, no, I'm feeling angry about this. Okay, there's a reason I'm feeling angry, but I definitely noticed. I can feel that. I can feel it in my body. I can feel that anger reaction. That gives you the moment to, if necessary, take a pause and say, okay, this is not the time for me to try and step in and deal with this. I need to just understand a bit more about what's going on with me, and I need to just let this process. And it just allows it the space to leave. Because if we're being curious about what kind of stuff is going on for us, there's not really space for us to be judging ourselves, and there's not space for us to be cross about it. So if you just can switch into that curiosity, that's really, really powerful. So once you know how you're feeling, and again, just think about the last time that this happened. What is it that you need? What is it that you need in order to overcome it, in order to feel better, in order to feel calmer, to feel soothed? What is it that you need in that moment typically? And then I want you to think about how you can actually share that. So what would be useful for other people to know? So I used to tell my bosses that I'm quite a loud personality in an office, and I could sometimes, just be a little bit of an attention-seeking drama queen from time to time. But I would quite often tell my bosses, actually, do you know what? If I'm having a rant and you can hear me, I'm fine. This is just my way of processing. If something's pissed me off a bit and I'm having a bit of a rant about it, I'm just working through it. If I'm really quiet, that's when you need to be concerned. And that's when you need to pay attention, because I may not necessarily notice that I've gone into being really quiet. But it's a useful piece of information. So just think about what could be helpful for people to know. Because again, this helps, like, we're not mind readers, and because we're all different, I think the more that you can step up in a space which says, hey, this is how I am. This is how I'm at my best. Tell me how you are. Tell me how you're at your best. It leaves that space for it. If you're starting with that position of setting an example, it really creates space for other people to step up into that too, rather than saying there's one way of doing things. It's really important. So now I want you to think about other people, and this is kind of the next stage of this. So I want you to think about a situation with a person where it's been something that's been kind of uncomfortable. So it might be that you've had a disagreement with somebody, or an argument. Perhaps it's, like I said before, you get somebody that just like rubs you up the wrong way, and they just annoy you a bit. It might be somebody that you feel angry with, somebody that's let you down, whatever it is. I just want you to just think about a situation that feels relatively recent, or feels like it's like a little bit fresh. So I want you to just reflect on this moment and reflect on everything that you know about this person, and you're going to take yourself out of the equation. And based on what you know, I just want you to think about what might be going on with that person. So think about what you know about their home life, if you know anything. If you know anything about the rest of their work environment, if you know anything about their personal lives, and so on and so forth. Just have a think about what might be going on with them. What we don't want to be is kind of like projecting and coming to massive conclusions on behalf of other people. But this is all just about, again, it's like, how do I take myself out? What could be happening there that might be driving some of this? Because when we start to think about it, what we might find is, oh, actually, do you know what, that person's running that massive project pretty much single-handedly, and it makes sense for them to be under a lot of stress right now. And that's something that I know. Because I think it's really important when we start really bringing empathy in, we're not excusing bad behavior, right? That's not what this is about. This is really just about understanding and getting more context. And as I say, it's about taking ourselves out of the equation. Because when we can do that, we're able to look at it with that full context and understand, okay, well, if this is behavior that's problematic, how do we address the source of it? How do we actually work on what's driving it? And how do we help the person move through that more effectively, rather than, pulling someone up and saying, like, you're too snappy in meetings. It's this way of communicating isn't productive. What's going on? How do we help you with that? So this is just all what helps kind of build up that really good kind of leadership skill. I want you to think now about what you could ask that person. So as I said, we're not trying to draw a full conclusion on our own. We're starting to just get a little bit of an understanding. So what kind of questions could you ask that person to find out more about what might be going on? And now I just want you to think about, based on all of that stuff, how much you feel like this could be nothing to do with you. Or how it might be something more than something to do with you. And just see what happens when you think about yourself being removed out of that and understanding more about what's going on. Because this stuff's really powerful. And this kind of work's important when we're doing things for ourselves as well. So when we're looking at the work around managing our own emotions and the self-reflection, that's the art that we want to get into. We want to be asking ourselves, like, what questions can I ask myself to understand what's going on with me even more? What might be happening with me on a bigger level that's driving this emotion, this reaction? If you have something, so for example, if you suddenly feel like you're really jealous of somebody, and there's someone that you see who's doing something, you're really jealous of that, like, rather than just sort of squashing the jealousy down or letting it become something that might be a little bit more toxic, because this is when the emotions can become toxic, basically, when we don't deal with them. So what we want to do is we want to deal with them, like, rather than allowing it to become something which is toxic and resentful and like maybe ends up in that kind of like, look at them. It's about, how do we turn that back and go, okay, I'm jealous of this person. What might that be about? What might the jealousy be telling me? Is there something that they have that I want? Is there something that they're demonstrating that I don't feel like I'm able to? Is there something that I can learn from this? Because that kind of stuff is coming from us, right? So in the same way as, like, if another person is behaving badly, how do we take ourselves out of it? When we have a feeling like that towards someone else, how do we take them out of it? So, and again, this is about how we have that two-way. So where might this person, if a person has behaved, I'm saying behaved badly, there might also be an element of, okay, well, there's a trigger here for me. So some of this might be some of their behavior, but also maybe I'm triggered by people who act in this way, who demonstrate this particular behavior. And that might be because of this, and this. So again, it's just that curiosity and keeping like building up the art of asking these questions. And as I said, it's a practice, and you start to get better at it over time. And you just start really simple, like, okay, what's going on? What can I learn from this? Where might this benefit me? You know, that kind of thing. Next one I want to talk about is intuition. This is kind of my favorite. It's kind of my favorite, I think, of all of them, because I think it's been such a game changer for me personally, like really connecting with my intuition, and it's helped me with a lot of these other aspects as well. So it's also kind of, it can be kind of a fun one to practice as well. So there's a few things that are really useful. So as I said at the beginning, I describe intuition a lot as it's a really, really important voice. And quite often it's a quiet voice in a very loud room. What we want to do is two things. We want to quiet down the room, and we want to increase the volume of the voice, so that in the moments where the room still ends up being noisy, we've actually got a better chance of hearing the voice as well. So just want to be able to work on both sides of that. And the first thing is, how can you find some quiet time to let your mind have some peace? Now, for some people, that might be meditation. That's definitely something that works really well for me, but I also know that doesn't work well for everybody. It's not necessarily something that everyone is comfortable with. So when I'm saying quiet time, what I'm really talking about is, how can you allow yourself peace in whatever way works for you? So being mindful, and being mindful is all about just being in the now, paying attention to what it is that we're doing. Are there things that you can do that allow you some mindfulness? You know, is it something like gardening or cooking, dancing? You know, what might it be that just enables you to let the world be quiet? As I say, it's really important that you find a way that works for you, because this is all about, we want things to feel like a bit of a flow. We want it to feel like it's actually possible to do. If we're trying to force ourselves into something that's not right for us, we're not going to be able to kind of keep it up. So just have a think about that. The next one is get creative. The more that we can kind of tap into our creativity, the more we can, that allows our intuition more space to come up. And again, creativity is about whatever works for you. So it's not about sitting and drawing. I can't sit and draw. I'm terrible. I learned through lockdown from buying a whole bunch of things to keep myself entertained that quite a few of them are not the ones for me. So what does creativity mean for you? So for me, cooking for me is a really big one. I love to take my time, like thinking about what I'm going to cook, thinking of a recipe, the time I spend doing it. That combines creativity and mindfulness for me to an extent. So it doesn't have to be, it's not literally like art. It's just about allowing you, again, to kind of create something. You know, it might be that you love upcycling furniture. It might be that it's something else entirely. So just think about how you can take that kind of space for creativity. Journaling can also be incredibly helpful. Again, it's not always necessarily something that works for everyone, but I think if this is something that you can give yourself a little bit of time to practice in very, very small amounts, it can become really powerful. So you just allow yourself space to write down like what is happening. It can become a conversation when it gives you a space basically to ask those questions of yourself and give you a space to write it down. You don't ever need to look at it again. You can rip your pages up and kind of put them in the bin if you want to. It doesn't have to make sense. It doesn't have to be written in full sentences, but we've got a way of just getting, because sometimes the noise is our own thoughts, right? It's not just everything else going on around us. And if you have a way of just getting them all out, you find that you can sometimes order them, or you can get to something that's going on underneath them. And that can be really helpful. I've got clients who love to do this handwritten. I'm certainly somebody who loves a handwritten journal, but also I've got clients who like to do this on the notes on their phone. So like, again, find a way that works for you, that makes it possible for you. This is definitely one to practice a little bit if you can. The next one is noticing how things feel. And this is kind of the really key stuff. So thinking back to, so spend a bit of time thinking about a time when you've known something was absolutely right or absolutely wrong. And think about how you've known it. Like, how did you know it was right or wrong? Like, what did you feel? What kind of sense did you get? And just kind of spend a bit of time with that. An exercise that I get people to do is to actually sit with this and bring the feelings in. So what you want to do is you want to sit down, quiet space, eyes closed is ideal. And you basically bring up the feelings of absolutely right and absolutely wrong. So you start with absolutely right, and you key into something that you've known has felt absolutely right, or something that you absolutely love, something that makes you feel really happy, that brings you joy, and notice how that feels in your body. Notice where you feel things shift. Do you have do you get a physical sensation? Do you just have it's like you can't pinpoint it, you just know? Is there almost like a little voice, like a little nudge that's telling you that this feels good? So this is a really key thing to practice. And I would say, like, do this a few times to really start getting familiar with it, because if we don't recognize the feeling, it's hard for us to know in the moment. So yeah, really just sit with this feeling of good, and then you're going to do the same with bad. So think about something that you know is not right, a decision that has not been right for you, something that makes you, that you recoil from. That's kind of what we want from that, something that you really feel yourself resisting. And again, how does that feel? Where do you feel it in your body? What are the emotions? What are the physical sensations, if you have any? Again, do you feel like a knowing? Is there a nudge coming from somewhere? Love that idea, Lauren. Yeah, it's really powerful. This is something that I've done quite a bit. I do this with all of my clients basically as an exercise. It's really, really good, because we don't often take the time to notice and to really kind of connect with what that feeling is. So that's something like to really kind of practice. And then learn over time how your intuition shows up for you. So are there certain moments that are a little bit different? Again, do you get the voice? Is it a feeling? Do you feel tingles? I tend to get, so for me, it shows up as like a kind of a tingly sensation, and just like a certainty. So the bigger the kind of emotion connected with a decision, this is when it's right, the bigger the emotion connected with a decision, the more extensive the physical sensation is for me now that I've kind of done a lot of this work. But then I also get kind of, and I'm sort of tapping like my solar plexus, basically. I just have like a sense of it's right in my solar plexus, and that's how I know. So just keep paying attention to it and kind of reflecting on it. And the next thing, and I've used this word a handful of times, but it is be curious. Like being curious about, particularly about yourself when it comes to building your intuition, is really, really important. But also be curious about other people, because our intuition, sometimes I think we have this sense that intuition is just like a thing that we're born with, and it will direct us in exactly the right way, in the same direction all the time. And as I said earlier, it's something that we build it over time. You know, a lot of it is like our subconscious's way of, it's bypassing all of the thinking because it knows that something is right or wrong. And it does that in part by learning and understanding. So be curious about other people as well. Be curious about what's going on. Questions. Like that's just the really key thing. And practicing that art of self-reflection is super important. So this is kind of this is like a bit of a whirlwind tour really of intuition, but a lot of these things, if you can practice them, are going to start getting you much, much closer to it. And as I said at the beginning, again, like if you can make a decision, you can choose something, if you can behave in a way that is completely true to what you want and is right for you, it's much easier to stand in the power of that. And it's much easier to quieten down all these voices which say, no, you shouldn't, this is wrong, whatever it might be. So I'm doing much more of this in my program, which I mentioned briefly. It's called Ignite, and that's launching 21st of March. And this is just all about there being more emotionally powerful female leaders. You know, it's about there being more women who are in a place to change the world, making it possible for more young women to come in and step up into this leadership, to see more women doing it, believing that then it's possible for you. I do want women to have more money. I do want women to have more influence. And I think that's all the stuff that's incredibly important. So that's what all of this is about, basically. If you want to know more about my program, then you can head to the website, which is beunleashedcoaching.com/ignite. But the link is in my Instagram bio, and I'll be sending the replay with all of the details to everybody, so you can have a look more there. I've got a limited number of spaces. So if it's something you're interested in, just book in a call with me. We can just have a chat. It's very relaxed, no pressure. You can just find out if it's something that you might benefit from, because that's what it's all about. So this wraps it up. Thank you all. Are there any questions or any kind of final things before we finish up? Okay, thank you. Thanks very much, Charlotte. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for being here in your various different, my double screen technology situation. Thank you very much for spending some time with me, for showing up for yourselves, because that's really what this is about. You know, you're kind of making a decision that this is something important for you. So I will be back at the same time tomorrow. Tomorrow we're going to be talking about authority, and that's all about how you actually bring these things together to stand in your own power. And that's the kind of key stuff. So I will be here, 12 o'clock tomorrow. Replays will be available afterwards. I will see you all then. Thank you so much. Bye.